All right, perfect. So thank you everyone for joining us for our first installment of Florida Collegiate DECA's Leadership Series. While COVID may have shaken up the status quo, we are so excited to still have the opportunity to provide these educational resources for your chapters. Tonight, we are discussing careers in nonprofit and volunteer experiences. I did mention this in the waiting room, but as an audience note, one of the organizations we'll be discussing will be addressing themes of suicide and mental health. While this panel isn't really directed towards that subject, it may just come up as part of the conversation because that's how the nonprofit operates in their mission. After our panel is complete, we'll also be hosting a question and answer portion for those who are interested in learning more. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists for tonight. So Kendra Gaunt, she goes by the pronouns of she and they interchangeably. She is a technologist who has engaged with organizations for the past 7 years to connect conscious design, interaction, and technology for people around the world. Specializing in technical product development, Kendra believes that leading with an intersectional perspective creates the space to develop products that serve the needs of all people, not just a core group. Kendra is presently the data and artificial intelligence product owner for the Trevor Project, the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people. The organization works to save young lives by providing support through free and confidential suicide prevention, crisis, and intervention programs on platforms where young people spend their time, a 24/7 phone line, chat, and text. The organization also runs Trevor Space, the world's largest safe space social networking site for LGBTQ youth, and operates innovative education and research and advocacy programs. Kendra is a certified Scrum product owner who holds degrees in management information systems and AI product development. Our second panelist is Christine Lee, who has been working in the nonprofit world for a little over 5 years. Her time started with a campaign called Dance Marathon they had at her alma mater, Florida Atlantic University. This led her to fall in love with the nonprofit sector, and she has spent time working for the Alzheimer's Association and the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, as well as many hours volunteering for other organizations. She graduated in December of 2019 with her master's in nonprofit management from Louisiana State University. Through her time in the nonprofit sector, she has built meaningful relationships with key community leaders throughout the country. So that being said, I would love to hear more about your story. So Christine, can you tell us a bit more of how you got there?
Of course. Thanks, Adriana. So like she mentioned, I'm Christine Lee. I have been in the nonprofit world for a little over 5 years. For those of you that are familiar with Dance Marathon, for those of you that aren't, it is a campaign that is held at some high schools, but mainly local colleges, where you're standing for the kids that can't. So you're raising money and awareness for Children's Miracle Network, which is a cluster of 170 hospitals throughout the country that are providing care and resources and support to sick children. So I planned a 13-hour marathon where kids were not allowed, or college students, sorry, they're not kids, were not allowed to sit at all for that whole 13 hours. So it was a lot of planning what food we were going to bring in, what kind of activities we could do to keep them busy. That made me fall in love with kind of giving back to the community, meeting the families, meeting these kids, and building that special bond. And then I started interning for the Alzheimer's Association, where I worked for about 4.5 years. And I am just starting my role with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society for their Light the Night campaign. Aside from all of my actual paid jobs in the nonprofit sector, I volunteer a lot. I've done the St. Jude run. I also am a coach for what we call buddy baseball here in Tampa. So it's special needs individuals playing baseball that are paired up with a buddy. So I coach that. It's Saturdays. It's really fun. But they're also a nonprofit. So they are run by sponsorships and volunteer work. So that's a little bit about me and my time. And I'm so excited to be here with you guys tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. So I've been a technologist for, pretty much my whole life, really. I was always trying to figure out like how to fix and break computers. And I was really fascinated at how it could be used to connect people across the world and really improve someone's quality of life. And so this really followed me like throughout grade school, high school, and I specialized in computer systems tech. And then I did my undergrad in information systems. And when it came time to figure out what was next, in my junior year, I started working full-time in tech in the for-profit space, and then went on to graduate and continue down that path professionally. And over the past 6 to 7 years, I've worked on tech teams in industries such as financial services, e-commerce, supply chain, management consulting, and then most recently at my first nonprofit, in a role at the Trevor Project, where I'm really sitting at the intersection of social good and technology. And so taking it back a little bit, around the 4 to 5 year mark of my professional career, I started to feel what I can only describe as a disassociation with the work that I was doing. I kind of felt like a drone on maybe even on autopilot, I guess, meaning I wasn't consistently connecting to the work or the people or the entity that was the organization, why it existed, or like what my role was in any of it. So, not to get too existential on you, but it really was an existential crisis of like, what am I doing here? What did I just spend 3.5 years and tens of thousands of dollars studying? For what, for who? Like, what is the greater purpose that I'm contributing to? So I knew I had this great educational background, skill set, experience, and it felt like it was being wasted away by working on projects that focused on how much revenue we could generate for the organization or how much money I could put into the pocket of CEOs or stakeholders, and really kind of just feeling I was just a number. And if something were to happen to me or I were to leave, they would just replace me the next day without blinking. That to me was and is really empty. And while I don't think this is specific to the organizations I worked at only, and I'm sure there are for-profit companies out there that don't embody the characteristics that I was referencing, I think it does speak to a much larger issue on how we assess someone's contribution to society and how it became normalized to be complacent, which is kind of weird to me. So once I became aware of all of this, I said to myself, what's your next best step? Something that I ask myself all the time now. And as I realized, it was to search for an organization that was values based and making strides in technological advancements too. It didn't have to be a tech company per se, because while the Trevor Project has a tech team and the work we do is highly enabled by tech, we're not a tech company, if that makes sense. And I also wanted to work with an organization that was driven by a mission that was not tied to revenue, one where I could also be my whole self at work and not have to come in being like a fragmented person. And so, to my pleasure, I found that space almost like it was meant for me in a sense. And it's a place where I can really lean into my identity as a Black queer woman to support young people who need it most. So if I had to summarize what I do in like a run-on sentence, it's probably to navigate people's needs, organizational context, data, and technology to help us uncover the problems that are worth solving and make decisions that allow us to provide LGBTQ youth with high quality care. So I work on a team of software engineers, machine learning engineers, and a data scientist to figure out how we can use and analyze large data sets and technologies such as machine learning to support youth in crisis, and those who are directly engaging with them, such as counselors and training staff. And so part of why I was drawn to this role and this organization is because, like I mentioned, as a Black queer woman, I recognized that I wanted to be able to lean into that identity and not feel like I had to mask it away to contribute to a mission of an organization that I really believe in. So I think getting to this point in my journey where I've been able to tie together, what I'm good at, like what I get paid to do, what brings fulfillment to my soul and has a positive impact on society and other marginalized people is a really beautiful space, and one that definitely wasn't without difficulty. But it helped me to develop a lot of empathy, awareness, and care that allows me to show up in the work that I do every day as I am. And these are all things that LGBTQ youth need in their support systems, especially when they're in a moment of crisis.
Awesome. Definitely sounds like some empowering work. You mentioned a really great part about standing by an organization that has a mission past revenue. And I think that that's something that a lot of nonprofits have in common. So what were some of the benefits that kind of drove both of you to pursue a nonprofit career versus a company that was for profit?
I'll take it. So basically, I fell in love with the relationship building that I got. So, like I said, my very first intro into anything nonprofit I did buddy baseball where I was one of the buddies for the kids growing up through high school. And I did a lot of service projects, Relay for Life, but I never really saw the nitty gritty part. I was just kind of that volunteer that was like very hands off. But becoming that hands on with the dance marathon and with those families, I'm friends with them on Facebook to this day. Like I follow all of their treatments still. And then I'll say like my past 4 years with the Alzheimer's Association, I've made friends with my volunteers that now I'm no longer with them. And I still talk to them all the time about their loved ones. And I think you don't really get that in a corporate role. I've never worked in a corporate role. So Kendra can touch maybe a little bit more on that. But from my experience, that relationship building that you build with these volunteers and the participants per se that I get to work with, we all have a reason that we're involved with the cause. I mean, I had a personal connection to the Alzheimer's Association. I have a personal connection to leukemia, lymphoma. So that's why I do what I do every day. But they all have their own personal reasons of why they're engaged as well. And hearing those stories and kind of getting to follow up on how's their mom or dad doing, or how whatever way they've been affected has changed throughout the course of the time I've known them. It's kind of cool. I get to like go on that journey with them. So that's why I really love it. It's really that one-on-one personal connection rather than sometimes the corporate world is just about money. From what I've heard, I don't, like I said, I've never worked for a for-profit, so I don't have much knowledge, but from what I've gathered in readings and things like that. So
No, I think that's definitely spot on. And I like a lot of what you said too about like working for nonprofits. So when it comes to like for profit, so I kind of like am the opposite. Like I spent my whole career so far like in for profit, and it was like, yeah, no, this is not it. This is like not where it's at all. Because I think in those spaces, at least the ones I was in, you can kind of see like, sure, a company might have like a mission, but it's not like a values-based mission. It's usually a mission based in revenue. And so because of that, I think you get, whether it's for profit or not for profit, I think you get people coming there for a wide variety of reasons. But I find that in the for profit space, people's kind of like ulterior motives and like personal agendas kind of creep in a bit more than I've seen at all, like in a nonprofit. And I think that brings me to one of the main reasons why I enjoy like working for a nonprofit so much, and the Trevor Project specifically, is because, you know, yes, we have deliverables, milestones, and due dates like a for-profit company. Yes, the work we're doing is highly impactful to the people we're serving. And, you know, yes, different departments have different priorities and roadmaps and timelines that you have to negotiate and manage. But there is literally never any question as to why we're there, who we're there for, and what we're doing, or our guiding light. And our mission is to end suicide among LGBTQ youth. So anytime we are in those, you know, quarterly roadmap meetings, or I'm negotiating things with stakeholders, that's always what we're striving for. And I think because you have this values-based mission that people are really are able to connect to from like their heart space, not from like, you know, their pockets, I guess, it makes it very easy to work with everyone. And I don't know if it's like this in other not-for-profits. So maybe like you can tell me this, because this is my only really experience in like a professional working capacity. I have volunteered for nonprofits, is everyone, and I think maybe it's too some of the nature of what we do, is that everyone is very just understanding and accepting of the fact like I'm a human being. So when like I come to work, like yes, I engage and I behave in a professional manner, but sometimes I just need a second. So like there are days where I've got back-to-back meetings, and I'll just tell my team like, hey everyone, I need like 5 minutes to go outside and do a meditation, or like pet my cat or something. Everyone's like, yeah, you're good, like just take your time, do what you need to do, take care of yourself. And so that's something that I really value about it.
I'm just going to add on a little bit more too from what you just said, because what you said sparked something. So like you were saying about building that connection with them. And another thing too, like we all, like we said, we do what we do for a reason. We have a connection to it. But working for a nonprofit too, and Kendra, you can probably elaborate or at least agree, hopefully. But I've met so many people that like why they're engaged also becomes my why. So when I'm talking to other people, especially corporations, or trying to get a sponsor, I'm tailoring the pitch to them and their company. So say I'm walking into a T-Mobile and I'm trying to get them to create a team for our upcoming walk or something. I'm not going in there and pitching, hey, old people are forgetting everything, they need help. I'm pitching, people are buying iPhones because it has face recognition to unlock their phone because they can't remember a passcode. Mm-hmm. So it's tailoring it like that. But then I'm using a personal story that I've heard from people that said, we went from Androids specifically to iPhones because of that face recognition. And their story becomes part, I don't want to say pitch, but part of that story of why I'm doing what I'm doing and ways to tailor it for those different companies. So that's something cool that I don't know, Kendra, like you said, you haven't been in the nonprofit sector for that long, but and Alzheimer's is very different and can be tailored like that for a lot of different things. But finding that creative niche, but it's not just being creative, it's because it's actually happening with individuals. So that's another really cool thing, that every little tidbit that your volunteers and your participants are sharing with you, that you can take and use that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And with my knowledge so far, I would say that, so for reference, the reason we feel and know that the work that, we're doing at the Trevor Project matters is because we do have some data behind this. So suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people, and LGBTQ youth are more than 4 times more likely than their peers to attempt suicide. And then youth who have LGBTQ youth who have families that reject them or their identities, or they're not affirming of their experiences, they're 8 times more likely. So you can see that there's this compounding effect based on the identity and situation of these youth that shapes their experience and struggles. And we have, through our research effort, we recently did, I think this is going to be our second year doing it, a national survey on LGBTQ mental health, where we've been able to estimate that there's about 1.8 million LGBTQ youth between the ages of, I believe, 13 and 24 that seriously consider suicide each year and could benefit from our services. So when we lean into that 1.8 million as a reference, last year we directly served over 150,000 crisis contexts. So while we've been able to reach a substantial amount of people, we know there's more people that need us. And so when we are talking to corporate partners or other people like that, those are things that, we really want to try and illustrate. And a majority of the people who choose to contact us rather than other providers, because our organization is LGBTQ affirming and a trusted provider of crisis services. And there's already so many barriers for youth to receive the level of care that they need. It ranges from maybe negative past experiences with healthcare providers who aren't affirming of their identity. Maybe they don't have the permission or support of their parents to access care. And the list honestly goes on. And as you layer in other identities and the intersection of those identities, such as race, ethnicity, and religion, and even socioeconomic status, it becomes even more complex. And so I think that just speaks to like why we're here and how we can really create a connection to the work that we do with people internally and when we're engaging folks externally.
Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting how both of you guys like correlate storytelling as such a big part of your organizations and like the reasons why you focus on nonprofits. So speaking of your organizations, how would you describe their mission statements, or like, and how it's applicable to your career choices? And so Christine, I'd like to hand that one off to you first, since you've recently started your new position.
I haven't started yet, but okay, putting me on the spot. I start on Monday. I'm going to touch on the Alzheimer's Association though, because I've been with them for 4 years. So our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementias. So we recently changed it because it used to be just Alzheimer's. For those of you that don't know a little bit about Alzheimer's, so dementia is kind of an umbrella term, and then there's a lot of different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common. So we changed it to kind of be all inclusive of all other dementias, because we support and do research on all of them. And most of the time you have multiple forms of dementia. My grandma had the disease for 15 years, and actually I am a part of Sigma Kappa sorority, which our philanthropy was the Alzheimer's Association. So we did the walk every year as a sisterhood with everyone. And I did the walk my first year. My grandma was still sick. We have a different color flower at the walk of how you've been affected. So I carried the caregiver flower. And unfortunately, the next day after I went to my first walk, my grandma passed away. So every year after that, I've carried the purple flower, which means you've lost someone to the disease. This is a lot not about the mission, but it's a little bit about the walk. So that's why I was drawn to the Alzheimer's Association and have done it for so long. What else am I forgetting? Because I know you asked like 2 questions in there.
If you could just go more into like the organization's mission statement and how like you live by it every day.
Okay. So really it's creating that awareness and providing those free resources to everyone that needs it. So in my time working for the Alzheimer's Association, we heard all too often like, oh, I wish I knew you guys existed when my mom had this disease. You guys could have helped so much. And I see Kendra nodding her head. So my goal was kind of to create that name for us. The Alzheimer's Association is a younger organization. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a lot of other organizations, but the American Cancer Society and American Heart Association have been around for hundreds of years. The Alzheimer's Association has only been around since 1980. So like, we're not talking that old. I think 89 too. So like we just came up on, I'm going to do math here, but we're only 30 years old. So we are a younger organization. A lot of people don't know about us, but we offer free care consultations. So like if you get a diagnosis, we'll walk you through financial planning, legal planning, all of the next steps, get you connected to a local support group, all for free. And then we also do educational programs for companies, for just individuals. So it was really for me, day to day was no matter who I was talking to, if I was talking to someone and trying to get a $10,000 donation, I wasn't leading with, hey, I need your money. It was, this is how we're helping these individuals that are affected. This is where your money is going. And I will touch, because I know in nonprofit world, the percentage of where your donor dollars is going is huge. So I do encourage you guys, if you are looking to get involved with a nonprofit, check out their statistics of kind of how much of the donor dollar is going to what they say it's going to. Some have really high ones, some have really low ones. So the national average is about, I want to say 9%, 9 to 12% in administrative costs. The Alzheimer's Association is, I might be a little off on these, but 6% for administrative cost, 19 for fundraising, and then the other, if my math is correct, 77%. I'm not good at math. That's why I do nonprofit. We have calculators. The other 77% is going to care support and research. So we have one of the absolute lowest in overhead cost. Like I said, that is very important if you're ever looking at volunteering or working or even donating to a nonprofit, to make sure that it's not going to the CEO's, pocketbook. So that's why I did what I did with the Alzheimer's Association. I can tell you a little bit more about leukemia lymphoma in a week. But I'm going to be managing their Light the Night campaign, and they're kind of very similar with the Alzheimer's Association. They've been around a lot longer. They're very corporate focused, where the Alzheimer's Association is very friends and family team focused. So that will be kind of a different opportunity for me. But it will still be for me taking those friends and family stories that I hear and bringing those into the corporate world, to kind of touch on 2 organizations there for you.
I was shaking my head earlier so much because that statement, like, I wish you would have existed earlier at a certain point in time in my journey or someone else's journey, is something that we hear a lot from parents to teachers, siblings, religious leaders, school officials. They reach out saying how, we supported someone that they care about. And, they were like, wow, this would have been, great for me or for someone else, 10, 15 years ago. And so even all of those people today reach out to reach out to us or access the resources on our website to figure out how they can support LGBTQ youth in their life, whether it's, you know, from coming out to figuring out relationships and like sexual health and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that really resonated. A quick history lesson to like help you understand the mission is that I believe it was in 1998, HBO aired Trevor, which is an Academy Award-winning short film. And the film followed the experience of a gay 13-year-old boy who, when he was rejected by his family, friends, and support, such as a priest, because of his sexuality, he makes a suicide attempt. And the people that produced this film thought it would be great if at the end they could provide some resources to LGBTQ folks who might need it. And to their surprise, or like maybe lack thereof, they realized that there was no suicide hotline specific for LGBTQ youth, or LGBTQ people, and specifically youth. And with that, they created the Trevor Lifeline, which is our phone service, which still operates today. And it was the first 24/7 national lifeline supporting LGBTQ youth in crisis. And the first calls were answered the night of that premiere. And so we've been in existence for just over 22 years now. And like I mentioned, we just started with the phone lifeline, and now we've expanded to different platforms such as chat and text, and other services that can help us work towards achieving the mission, which is to end suicide among LGBTQ youth. And of the people that reach out to us, 90% of the young people who reach out to us experience a de-escalation in suicidal thoughts. And so LGBTQ youth who report having at least one accepting adult in their life were 40% less likely to report a suicide attempt in the past year. And so part of why I feel so drawn to this is, you know, one, just as someone who belongs in the LGBTQ community and like coming up in that and trying to figure out what that meant for myself, I definitely had my own like experiences with mental health, and also seeing people that I know. And something that some of my colleagues say too is, you know, some of them have children and they're kind of like, you know, what if this was my child that was reaching out? You know, wouldn't you want someone to be there and to support them? And so I think about that, you know, for my sisters or my kind of adopted nieces and nephews or my future family, like I would want that to be available there for them. And so we really aim to meet them where they're at in crisis, whatever that means for them at the moment, because they are the expert of their own experience. And so we want to do that with a clear message that they should be proud of who they are and that they're not alone in this. And so I think that from like a values-based space is why I'm there. And then I think when it comes to marrying in that technical component, I just know that if we want to be able to reach all of the young people that need us, we need to scale, yes, like our operations, but we also need to really fortify the technical platforms that we use to communicate with them and the way that we engage with them, like on socials or through something such as Trevor Space, which was mentioned earlier. So that is why I feel so closely tied to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's definitely like important. I feel like it's more special when you connect to the organization that you're working with. Like it makes things so much more profound and you're much more driven with it. So kind of like Christine was saying, like I also have a personal connection to Alzheimer's. So that's why I've been super involved with like volunteering with them and like participating in when my sorority Sigma Kappa as well. Like when we participate in the walk, that's a big part of me. Of my identity and like the things that I find interesting. And so volunteering has always been super, super important for me. Have you guys volunteered with your organization prior to working with them, or were you volunteering with organizations that had a similar mission, or any volunteer experience prior to that?
So my time in Dance Marathon was all volunteer. And then I started as an intern for the Alzheimer's Association. So it started as a volunteer, but I wasn't doing necessarily volunteer roles. I was just helping staff out. My primary volunteer role is buddy baseball. So helping the special needs kids. Other than that, and Kendra, I don't know if you've really run into this, some of the larger nonprofits. So like I would love to volunteer for like the St. Jude running committee for their run, walk, 5K. But when you're also a nonprofit professional who works on a walk, it's a little harder. It's kind of like an unspoken word of like, you don't really want to go volunteer because it's like, are you just trying to steal our stuff? Which I don't agree with. That's why I always participate on a friends and family level. I create teams and I still do fundraising and things like that. But for that actual like real hands-on experience, like I would still love to volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association. But since I'm no longer with them as staff and I'm working for basically a competitor per se, I will still keep my friends and family team, but that like one-on-one hands-on experience for a staff person, not the best. But I encourage everyone else, if you're an intern or if you want to get into the nonprofit world, volunteer with as many as you can. Everyone has roles big and small. If you want to make 5 phone calls a week, if you want to pour 5 hours into it a week, every nonprofit out there is always looking for help and will meet whatever time requirement that you have to give. And I can say that pretty confidently. I see Kendra kind of shaking her head out there as well. But definitely try out a lot of different organizations, big organizations that are nationally known, small local organizations are some of my absolute favorites because I think you learn a lot from those grassroots, rather than the very large organizations that do the same thing all across the country, because every neighborhood and every community is different. So that's my volunteer experience. Not a lot of it, but I've worked with a lot of amazing volunteers that volunteer for a lot of different organizations too.
I love that. And I had that as like a talking note for later on some advice. So maybe I'll hold that for maybe at the end. Yeah, so no, I did not volunteer with the Trevor Project or even really a similar organization prior to joining. My volunteer experience so far has been with organizations that were really dedicated to bringing visibility to women and girls in tech. At one point, I was a teacher's aide to someone who educated me in grade school. I've worked with Habitat for Humanity and an animal shelter. So all kind of like different spaces, and they all taught me some very different and some of the same things that I literally employ in everyday life at and outside of work. I think I used to view volunteering as something you do on a one-off or an ad hoc basis, which I think is great. And I mean, help where you can, get it how you live kind of thing. But I say that to illustrate how my views of volunteering shaped how I historically engaged with it. Now, I would say that I feel that through the work that I've done with the Trevor Project, I really see the benefit both to the person volunteering and the organization of building a more sustained relationship and volunteer engagement, especially for something I'm or you're particularly passionate about. And I think with the Trevor Project specifically, I wasn't aware up until a little bit before I applied that it existed. And when I learned about this, I was kind of like, oh, duh. It's like, you know, like your glasses are on your head, but then you're like, where are my glasses? And it's like, okay, like, of course that this should exist. Why wouldn't it exist? Like LGBTQs need this. And especially as I started, like I mentioned, thinking about like my own relationship between my sexual and gender identity and how my mental health was influenced by that journey, along with the intersectional factors of me being Black and a woman. So the Trevor Project, I think, is serving a really unique and marginalized group of our population. And, you know, despite the fact that I do identify within the community, it wasn't something that I knew about. And I think this is in part due to the fact that I wasn't really focused on actively sourcing volunteer opportunities. Some of the ones that I mentioned, they kind of fell in my lap, which does require a little bit of action to like go for it, but I wasn't really like actively searching for those. And that's something that I wish I would have done more of earlier on, because maybe I would have gotten to nonprofit earlier. But I'm here now and I'm really thankful so far. And something that you mentioned, which was part of why I was like shaking my head, is that I currently volunteer for an organization called Hope for Youth, which is a nonprofit that provides mentorship, tech education, and I don't think they're doing it anymore, but international exposure and trips to help empower underrepresented girls and minorities to pursue careers in STEM. And so I remember they had actually like this job posting. I think it might have been full time. I don't know if it was part time. And I told them, I'm like, hey, like I already have a full time job. Like I can't really engage with you in this capacity. I said, but here's a list of things that I know how to do really well. Are any of these useful to you? And it turns out like, yeah, it was. And so now I write their newsletter. When originally they weren't searching for like a newsletter author as a volunteer. So you can definitely create those spaces for yourself by making those connections. And just because, you know, they don't have that position on a website or like on a flyer somewhere doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I would definitely say like to lean into your own strengths and kind of put yourself out there and make those connections to see where you can like tie things together.
And literally one more thing just off of what you said, because it just sparked something. So as an intern, my organization and my mentor was really good about asking what I wanted to learn, like, so what she could teach me, but as well as what were my strengths. So they were doing things that I was already good at, but then they were also pushing me in things I'd never done, to kind of push myself outside my comfort zone. So if you do decide to intern for an organization, I suggest kind of making a list. So kind of have that, okay, these are my top skills that I can really help you with. Like Kendra said, like she didn't even know that they were looking for someone. And now she's volunteering on this awesome capacity that they needed someone with her skill set. So that, but also like, what's something I kind of want to learn? Like something I had never really been into was a large sponsorship ask, but I knew I needed to do that for the betterment of my career. So I was like, as uncomfortable as this is, like if you could bring me in some of these meetings so I can just listen to you talk and kind of learn the lingo. So just making sure that you're vulnerable and you're getting what you want out of your volunteer work or your internship. I do that with my volunteers as soon as they come on board, of what are you looking to gain and what are your strengths. So I make sure I pair them with the correct projects for things they like. If you are not outgoing and you hate making phone calls, and then I give you 20 phone calls a week, you're not going to enjoy your time as a volunteer with us. So might seem like common sense, but sometimes it's not. So I just recommend making that list and kind of setting that expectation pretty high at the beginning.
I think it's definitely really interesting how both of you mentioned that, yes, you didn't have that much volunteer experience, but you learned so much from it. And I think that that's like a really great thing that not a lot of people really expect. Like I know personally, like volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association, the social media stuff that I've been doing are things that like I typically would have never learned if I didn't have to sit down and like practice this for like somebody who wanted this content to be produced. But another great thing is that it provides a lot of work experience, and like with DECA being primarily focused in on professional development and ways that we can grow as young professionals, a lot of us sometimes aren't really sure of whether or not we should include that volunteer experience on a resume, or like how to talk about it during interviews. So how would you guys recommend going about that? Do you think that they should be included, or how should we reference it in interviews and things like that? So I just kind of want to pick your brain in that aspect. So Kendra, if you'd like to go first, I think you'd have an interesting perspective being with tech.
Yeah. So first I'll absolutely include it. I think we've all experienced it, or most of us, or seen a meme where it's like the job you want lists like 3 years of experience for an entry level position and you don't have experience. So you're wondering like, how does that even work? Like, how does that happen? I mean, and I'm hoping that this changes, but I think it's still part of our reality. But I think that volunteering is a really natural way to do this. And if you can tie it in with something you're interested in and studying, great. Though I wouldn't want to try to stress that too much, because I think you'll be surprised that even volunteer opportunities that exist outside of your field of study or your desired career will still help you and can be easily applied across industries. So earlier, I mentioned volunteering at an animal shelter with it was like with 60 cats, I think. So it was kind of a lot. And in the tech and project management space, we literally have a term called herding cats. And I don't think I have it here, but we had like this awards and I got like the best cat herder like volunteer and one of my tech roles. And because sometimes that's what it feels like to get all 10 stakeholders together, present something, navigate their feedback, incorporate that into designs, go back through the feedback loop. do user testing, and figure out how to launch the product. So, what seemed to be at the time an irrelevant volunteer position has still served me to this day. And I also really love cats. So it kind of like worked out. With respect to the tech piece, I would say something that I see a lot of like my friends or my peers and even myself do is we kind of like connect with each other. So, if I have a friend who's, working on, who has like an app idea, or they have a business and they have a website, I can like easily like refer people within my network. And sometimes if two people are like just getting started, it can be less of like, I'm going to pay you for this, but more of like bartering our services. So I might be able to contribute like building a website, and I'll stick with a theme. And maybe in return, that person can teach me about like public speaking, or maybe they have like a pet sitting business and they'll like watch my cats or something, So I would say it can be really versatile, and to just keep your mind open and really include it. And I would really try to draw into something that I do with my resumes, even like within the professional working capacity, is try to figure out, it's always good if you can quantify the impact that you have with numbers. So when it comes to thinking about like how many people you've helped, how many people you've served, if you were able to kind of like increase any type of engagement, if revenue is a part of it, great. But like, if not, I think you can find other ways to do that too.
Basically everything Kendra said, unless you're volunteering for a lot of different organizations, and like volunteering and like participating in events are very different. So like if you're doing like the cancer walk and Relay for Life and the St. Jude walk and the Alzheimer's walk, do not list all 5 walks. Just say like there's various ways that you can say active in multiple nonprofits with their fundraising walks. Everyone normally has a favorite one, but definitely that quantifiable piece Kendra just mentioned of, during my time as a volunteer, I called this many people, and in return, they raised this much amount of money. And if you don't know those numbers, get with your staff partner or whoever is running the event you're volunteering for, and they can get it for you. Even if you're volunteering, like not on a committee per se, like she said, that quantifiable stuff is really, really good, but kind of tailor it to what your job description for the job you're applying for. So I was taught when I started applying for real jobs, even my internship, make sure you tailor your resume to the job you're applying for. Your resume shouldn't be the same for every job. And whether that's just adding key lingo from whatever the job description is into your lingo on your resume of your description about yourself or your previous roles. I mean, my previous roles, I do the same thing in just different cities and capacities, but depending on the organization, I'm going to tailor it based on their focus. So I'll say for leukemia lymphoma, I know they're very corporate focused. So I made sure I added in a specific piece into my description of my time with the Alzheimer's Association about my relationships and about my work with corporate entities. Same with volunteers. So if you're applying for a nonprofit job, great, add in your corporate relationships or whatever you did. But if you're applying for a for-profit job too, most big companies or any company is also very community driven. And I can say that from the nonprofit sector. Kendra can probably touch on it from the corporate world. They always have a like community outreach staff person or just kind of their own philanthropies that they support. And they encourage their employees to have their own nonprofits that they support that then the company can support too. So adding that on can really set you apart from others, in my opinion. Like if I worked for a big for-profit company, even a nonprofit, and I see you volunteer in your free time, you're one, just a really good person because you're doing something other than just what you want to do, and you're helping other people. But also it shows that you can follow through and support a mission, and like I said, are just a really good person. So that's kind of both sides of it from my opinion.
Awesome. So both of you have really like taught us a lot about what your organization does and like how it's impacted you guys. How can people get involved with your organizations?
Yeah, so I think something I really, really love is that our organization is comprised mostly of volunteers. So we're only as impactful and successful in serving LGBTQ youth as the volunteers who work with us. And there are a few ways you can get involved. So first I'll touch on some general calls to action, and then I'll speak about how you can get involved as a volunteer. So first is donating, standard for a lot of organizations, but this gift can really allow us to help us expand our advocacy efforts, train a record number of crisis counselors, and embark on other initiatives that help us to strengthen our service. And speaking to kind of like that for-profit engagement, there are a lot of companies who do matching of donations. So whether you work for them or like your family or your friends or other people, I would always check that out. And we do have kind of like a drop down on our site of people that do. You can also host a fundraiser. And I don't know, maybe if you go to the website, you'll see that, or I can share some links and maybe we can share those out afterwards. And then the newsletter. So an email newsletter that allows you to keep up to date on what's happening. For volunteering, you can volunteer with the Trevor Project from anywhere in the country. So also really nice. So if you're interested in becoming a crisis counselor to support LGBTQ youth through the phone, text, or chat, or even help with some of our advocacy work in your home state, you can visit us at thetrevorproject.org /get-involved. And here you can learn more about the programs, training requirements, volunteer commitments, the process, and all of your volunteer perks as well. You do have to be at least 18 years old to apply to be a volunteer. So I would keep that in mind. But yeah, we would love to have you. And of course, you can always reach out to me separately if you have questions, or I can also direct you to folks who can answer your questions.
So kind of the same. Obviously, we love donations. But so for the walk, you can join our planning committee, which Adriana is a part of. So she does kind of our social media. She makes our graphics. She posts on our Instagram and has made it beautiful because I cannot do that. And then also just being a walker or being a team captain is huge. I mean, even sharing your page on like Facebook and why you're walking and what the walk is or what the association or society provides the community is huge. Like we mentioned earlier, we hear way too often that people wish they knew we existed sooner. And I've seen so many friends post, oh my gosh, my friend from high school's dad just got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Or one of my middle school friends was like, oh, my dad just got diagnosed with early onset. And I messaged her and I was like, hey, I haven't talked to you since middle school, but here is the helpline number. Here is what the association does. Please reach out if you need help with anything. And it's kind of just being vulnerable and kind of sharing the organization and versing yourself with what the organization can provide. If you know what the organization can do, no matter where you are, you can help someone, even just wearing like a shirt about the organization. We have a volunteer actually out of Tennessee that says no matter where he goes or what, like if he's going grocery shopping or if he's walking through the airport, he's always wearing some sort of Alzheimer's shirt because he knows that creates awareness. And then people always reach out and they're like, what is the walk? And then he explains it to them. So that's just another cool avenue of, you don't have to be making phone calls or putting in all this blood, sweat, and tears and hours out of your week. It could just be posting on Facebook or like wearing a shirt in public and educating someone on the organization and what they provide. So that's it.
Really cool information, guys. Yeah, I definitely think it's always important to get involved and just to like give back to your community. So I encourage everybody on this call to find causes they're passionate about and find ways to get involved with them. For anybody who's interested in joining a nonprofit for a career choice, what would you guys say is the best piece of advice that you guys can give? And I'll start with Kendra, because I remember you mentioned you had a little nugget of wisdom you were going to save for later.
Yeah, I think I might have already touched on it. So I would say to do some discovery and find one that really resonates with you on a personal and or professional level. I think it can be really helpful to look at organizations, look at their website, to learn about their culture, their mission, their strategic plan, and the different ways you can get involved. And you can also take then take that and then map that to your own interest or your own development plan and see how that aligns. Secondly, I would say get creative with it. I also, I think, mentioned this earlier. So try not to get tunnel vision in your search for a volunteer opportunity, be open to new experiences and how they might help you down the line, because sometimes that's something that's not always noticeable in the moment. So think about ways that volunteering at an animal shelter will help you develop technical products used by people around the world. You might also find, which I've known people that this has happened to, that through volunteering somewhere, it also opens up a career opportunity at that organization that didn't exist before. So, maybe they didn't know that they needed a particular skill set until you came in. And then I would say last is reach out to someone who already works or volunteers there. I think it can be as simple as reaching out, via LinkedIn or emailing them and saying, hey, I noticed you work or volunteer at, ABC nonprofit, and this intersects with my interests because, XYZ. Do you have 15 minutes to chat with me about the organization and your experience? I think this can be a really great way to establish rapport and learn more about if the place is a good fit for you.
Everything Kendra said, like she said, kind of explore other opportunities. So I touched on it earlier, checking out the nonprofit and kind of seeing where their money is going. Even if you don't want to work for a nonprofit, volunteering for a nonprofit or interning for a nonprofit can set you up for success in the for-profit world. You kind of see a different side of the sector. So throughout school, I was going to be a business major, and then I switched basically to the public sector, which is the nonprofit sector. So they run very differently, but there are some parallels. So definitely check out different organizations, big ones, small ones. We all learn from each other. I've had the experiences with larger nonprofits, but I've done some work with smaller ones. Like I said earlier, the smaller ones sometimes bear more fruit for me because of that grassroots, and they're really nitty gritty in the community and really are helping the individuals that they need it the most. But for them, it's harder. I mean, like we said earlier and multiple times, that it's harder to hear that people didn't know you existed. So no matter what you're doing, just kind of pour your heart and soul into it and be vulnerable and challenge yourself and challenge the organization and make sure you're getting what you want to be getting out of your experience.
Very well said, ladies. Those are all the questions I have for you guys. So now I just want to open it up to the floor. So any of our attendees, if you guys have any questions, you can either unmute yourselves and ask, or you can utilize the chat feature, and we can hopefully answer some questions. So anybody, ask away.
It's totally okay. Oh, sorry, I was going to say something.
You can go ahead, Kendra. That's all good.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that if you all would like to reach out, I don't know, maybe people are in situations where maybe they can't ask questions right now. And I know sometimes I get a little bit shy on Zoom calls. So you can always find me on LinkedIn at Kendra Gaunt and let me know if anything comes up after the fact too. So don't want anyone to feel pressure to figure out a question right now.
You can also add me on LinkedIn, Christine Lee. I apologize for this man behind me. I will also add my name and phone number in the chat. So if anyone needs anything, you're more than welcome to reach out. If you're looking to get involved or have other questions about nonprofit, getting your master's in anything, or kind of even what to study in school, if you kind of want to go down that nonprofit route, I'm sure either one of us would be more than happy to help. I mean, my bachelor's is in public administration with a minor in nonprofit, and then my master's is in nonprofit administration with a focus in development. So it's a lot of titles. But like I said, I went the public sector. I know a lot of people that have MBAs that are working for nonprofits. So Really, if you have any questions at all regarding, I would say, life, you're more than welcome to reach out.
So we do have one question coming in. Jackie, if you want, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you're able to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So, I know you were just talking about like the route you would go for your master's. So I'm getting an undergrad right now in accounting, but then I want to go to law school, but I want to do a double major in a sense where I can get my master's. But I want to get more involved in like the nonprofit sector. So what would you recommend that I look into for the master's program?
So my master's is in, like I said, nonprofit administration, and MBA is always good for everything. Or another one that I've found from others is like a public administration, public management master's, because that's really going to go deeper into the public sector of communities, community development, and more kind of the science side. I also know a lot of individuals within the Alzheimer's Association that are getting masters in like leadership development, which is always good for any type of role, especially if you want to kind of be a leader in general. So that's kind of what I would say if you don't want to, because nonprofit like administration is just very narrow. And in that, I really only learned about nonprofit and I had to do just projects on nonprofits. But if you want to go to law school, I recommend public administration, depending on what kind of law you want to practice too. If you want to be like a public defendant or anything like that, that would be a good route, I would think, because that's what my undergrad was in, and that is really what set me up for a lot of my knowledge of the public sector.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect, great question. So like Kendra mentioned, if some of you guys would like to reach out to them personally and privately, I know Christine just entered her name and phone number in the chat, and then you guys are more than welcome to add Kendra on LinkedIn like she suggested earlier. But thank you guys so much for attending, and thank you so much to our panelists. You guys definitely gave a lot of nuggets of wisdom that I'm sure a lot of us can utilize in our careers, whether we do end up going for the for-profit or nonprofit route. If you guys would like to see more from Florida Collegiate DECA, please be sure you follow us on Instagram. It's at Florida_CDECA. We'll be hosting our next panel on November 4th, so be on the lookout for that. It should be really fun, more chapter oriented. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evenings. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to our panelists or myself, and I can direct you into where to contact who and all of those fun logistics. But enjoy the rest of your evening, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
bye.
you, guys.